Got the inflation numbers earlier today, 3.2% increase. That's up from last month, June, it was 3.0. So that means, well, it means things are still way more expensive than they should be. In fact, take a look at this graph that shows you exactly what the consumer price index has done. See that steep increase there? What's the date? January 2021. What happened January of 2021 to make inflation go up so drastically and stay up? Let's bring in somebody who might know a thing or two about the economy. Is the founder of the Club for Growth, founder of the Committee to Unleash Prosperity. He's Steve Moore. Steve, I don't know. You're the expert here. What happened January of 21 to make inflation spike like that?
Yeah, gee, what could it have been? What happened in January 21? Oh, yeah, we changed presidents. So,
Uh,
do you know what the inflation rate was the month that Trump left office, Larry? I know you're the one who's supposed to be asking the questions, but
all right.
uh,
You always give me a test more. All right. I'm going to say about 1.2.
you're about 1.5%. So you're pretty
Okay.
close. So we went from think about this. We went from 1.5% inflation under Trump to 9.2% inflation under Biden in just 18 months, which is incredible. Wouldn't have thought you could screw up the economy that quickly. And so now we're down to about 3.5% inflation. But I got to tell you, Larry, every time I go to the grocery store or you know, uh, just go out on the street and meet people, people get angry at me and they say, "Why do you say inflation is only 4 or 5%?" Most people believe the real inflation that their family is facing is more like 10 to 20%. Because, Larry, when you look at the things you have to buy, you have to pay your rent, you have to fill up your gas tank, you have to buy food for your family and go to the grocery store. Those things are up way more than the consumer price index is. And so the bottom line is Americans are in a bad mood because our incomes are not keeping pace with that higher rate of inflation.
Yeah, and the only message you get from the president right now is, well, wages are up, wages are up. Let's take a look at this graph that shows wages in the Biden economy. This one, if you look, yeah, starting in January 2021, you've got wages, that's the blue line. And sure, I guess it looks like wages are up. However, that green line, that green line is actually the real earnings
That's right.
adjusted for inflation. In other words, you may be making more money, but the green line there shows you what that money is buying you. That's the critical thing.
Exactly. So let's put that all together. And what that means for, let's say, an average income family in America today, maybe making $85,000 a year, they've lost, depending on how you measure it, about $5,000 in purchasing power. That's a big pay cut, Larry. You want to take a $5,000 pay cut? That's what the average American is seeing because their salaries keep falling behind inflation. I'd love to see those wage rates rise faster so that people aren't facing that deficit. But it's put Americans in a bad mood. It means you can buy less. And we haven't seen a situation like that since the 1970s when Jimmy Carter was president.
Yeah, because you couple all of those numbers, the wage issue in terms of real wages compared to inflation, just the base inflation numbers over the last 3 years. Add to that, though, the interest rates, Steve. I mean, I mean, people can't buy a home right now because of mortgage rates. And we just topped $1 trillion for the first time in history in consumer debt, credit card debt. This is a recipe for disaster.
So this is what really, by the way, I want to make sure people can connect the dots of why this is happening. Why did we see this massive surge in inflation? And I think most people kind of understand this intuitively that Biden came in. What was the first thing he did? He spent 1 trillion, then 2 trillion, and another 2 trillion. And we've added $6 trillion to the national debt in less than 3 years, Larry.
Yeah.
And I mean, on top of the normal budget that we spent. So what happened was you had a massive inflow of debt and government spending, and that basically forced the Fed to raise interest rates. We've now had, I think, 11 rate increases, and that gets to your point about mortgage rates. So here's another one for you, Larry. When Trump left office, the mortgage interest rate was 3% on buying a new home. It's now 7%. That happened
Yeah.
in 30 months.
Yeah, it's insane. And it's all policy driven, as you just laid out, Steve. Let me ask you this. The other thing you'll hear from the White House is, well, we've made all these jobs, we've created these jobs. Has anyone, maybe you have with the various organizations you work with, have you broken down of the jobs that have been so-called created since Joe Biden became president? How many of those are just people returning to work after the pandemic?
Yeah, we did a study just this past week that looked at this claim that Biden at White House put out this chart that went viral on the internet saying, I'm the number one job creator in American history. More jobs than under Reagan, more jobs than under Clinton, more jobs than under Trump. And it turns out what he was doing, and I can't believe the White House thought they could get away with this, was they were just counting the jobs that came back when COVID ended. And that was, several million jobs that had, people being laid off because we shut down our businesses. I mean, Larry, let's put it like this. If Donald Duck had been elected president in 2021, those jobs would have come back. So for him to take credit for that is ridiculous. If you take out the jobs that just returned as a result of COVID, actually Biden has a very below average rate of job growth.
So you mentioned Donald Duck. How about the other Donald that's looking to be president? I know, Steve, that you were President Trump's advisor during the 2016 campaign and during the administration. I believe you've now joined the campaign again as an economic advisor. Can you give us a hint as to how President Trump can turn this around should he win the White House?
It's so funny because I was with the president as President Trump about a week ago, and I asked him that very question. I said, "What are you going to do to turn around the economy?" And he said, "I'm going to look at all the policies that Biden's put in place and do exactly the opposite." He was exaggerating a little bit, but look, let's go back to being energy, the number one energy producer in the world. The gas price has gone from $2.39 a gallon to $3.89 a gallon under Biden. He said he will do drill, baby, drill. We're going to produce American energy. We're going to get control of the border. We're going to try to make sure that the Trump tax cuts, which I helped do for the president, we're going to make those permanent. So instead of raising the taxes on American businesses and families, we're going to cut them. And then we're going to deregulate. The cost of Biden's regulations have cost the American family about $5,000 a family. We're going to try to go back to Biden. Remember, Trump actually reduced the regulatory costs for American families. Remember when Trump said, I'm going to reduce 2 regulations for every new regulation? That happened. Biden's done just the opposite. And those regulations impose a very stiff cost on American families.
Steve, I'm lucky enough to be a subscriber to your daily newsletter, the Unleash Prosperity newsletter from the Committee to Unleash Prosperity. You've been talking quite a bit in the last couple of weeks about the circumstances in China. It's hard not to look at the economic conditions here in America with our high interest rates, the cost of doing business, the cost of goods and services, the inflation problems that we've got, and not then look at how that has become a national security issue. The more we are dependent on the slave labor in China for the cost of our products and goods, the more beholden we are to their foreign aggression to our allies like Taiwan and other nations. So fixing the economy is not just about us having, lots of money in our bank as American consumers, but this is about our sovereign freedom. This is about our national security in the long run.
Yeah, you better believe it. And remember what Trump used to say in 2016, that the other countries were laughing behind our backs. That's what they're doing now under Biden. I mean, can you imagine a dumber policy than reducing our oil and gas output in this country? Less from Texas, less from Oklahoma, less from North Dakota and West Virginia. So now where are we getting it from? Oh, now we have to get it from, let's see, OPEC countries, the Arab countries, Russia. I really honestly believe, Larry, that if Trump had still been president, there's no way that Russia would have had the money to go into Ukraine in their evil military machine, because they wouldn't have the money to do it. But by reducing our oil and gas production, the Russians have been the major beneficiaries of that. So you're exactly right. These economic issues are not just about making Americans better off financially, but they're also about our national security. And we better get tough with China, because all Biden cares about with China is getting these phony climate change deals. And I guarantee you one thing, Larry, President Xi does not care about climate change. He cares about over the world economy.
Oh, you can tell by all the soot coming out of his coal-fired plants across his nation. Right to mention Russia and OPEC and Venezuela as these terrible countries we're getting oil from. But Steve, it gets even worse. We're getting oil from Canada. I mean, those guys is begging to be invaded. Thanks for joining us, Steve
Kelly,
Moore. Always good
really
to
fun.
have you. There's more to come on O'Connor tonight.